Sometimes nostalgia doesn't come from the big moments, but from the little treasures that quietly shaped our lives. The 1960s wasn't just about rock and roll, moon landings, or civil rights marches. It was about the small, everyday things, the ones we hardly noticed at the time, that have slipped through our fingers forever. From the smell of fresh vinyl seats in a brand new Chevy to the hum of a tube television warming up in the living room, these are the treasures of a world that's never coming back. Let's take a trip down memory lane to the 1960s America that only lives in our hearts. It was more than just a place for medicine. It was the heartbeat of small-town America. Rows of shiny glass bottles, neatly labeled behind the counter, and that unforgettable smell of rubbing alcohol mixed with sweet penny candy. You'd step inside to hear the soft ding of the doorbell and maybe the soda fountain fizzing in the back. Teenagers gathered on spinning stools, sipping root beer floats, while old men chatted with the pharmacist who knew everyone's name. For just a nickel, you could walk out with a paper sack filled with jawbreakers, licorice whips, or a bottle of Coca-Cola chilled in an ice chest. The drugstore wasn't just about medicine, it was about connection, trust, and a slower pace of life. Today, big chains may sell more, but they'll never feel the same. Walking into a 1960s record store was like stepping into another universe. The walls were lined with rows of 45s, their colorful sleeves promising the next big hit. Teenagers huddled together, flipping through vinyl, holding each one like a fragile treasure. And if you were lucky, the store had a jukebox, gleaming chrome, glowing lights, and the satisfying clunk when the arm dropped onto a record. For a dime, the room filled with Elvis, the Supremes, or the Beach Boys. Couples leaned close, friends laughed, and strangers nodded along to the same beat. It wasn't just music, it was community, joy, and discovery. Today, we stream songs in seconds, but nothing matches the thrill of dropping a coin and hearing your song fill the room. Imagine a summer night in the 1960s. You pull into a gravel lot with your family, windows rolled down, a little breeze carrying the smell of popcorn. Kids in pajamas bounce in the back seat while parents settle in with sodas and hot dogs from the snack bar. Then the movie flickers onto the giant outdoor screen, larger than life under the stars. The sound crackles through a metal speaker hooked onto your window, tinny but magical. Couples whispered in the front seat, kids giggled in the back, and teenagers leaned against car hoods, eyes glued to the screen. Drive-ins weren't just about movies. They were about community, family, and a shared experience under the open sky, a world that feels almost impossible today. Every town had one, and everyone loved it. The wooden floors creaked under your shoes as you wandered past aisles filled with everything you didn't know you needed. Buttons, ribbons, kitchen gadgets, coloring books, marbles, and of course, the lunch counter. For just a few coins, you could sit down to a plate of hot meatloaf, mashed potatoes, or a grilled cheese with a milkshake. Family shopped there, kids begged for toys, and teenagers gathered for an after-school snack. Woolworth's wasn't fancy, but it was dependable. It was warm, familiar, and filled with memories of simpler days. Walking through one today would feel like stepping into a time machine. There was something so futuristic and yet so simple about the automat. You'd walk in, drop a coin, and pull open a little glass door to find a slice of pie, a sandwich, or a steaming hot meal waiting for you. Cafeterias, too, with their endless trays of comfort food, were perfect for families and workers alike. The food wasn't fancy, but it was hearty, affordable, and shared among strangers who all felt a little bit like neighbors.
The clatter of trays, the smell of coffee, and the sight of kids pressing noses to the dessert case, it was all part of the experience. Today, fast food may be faster, but it doesn't carry the same warmth or wonder.
Nostalgia doesn't always live in the big events we read about in history books. More often, it hides in the quiet corners of everyday life, the small treasures that once defined our days. In the 1960s, America was alive with change. But beneath the headlines, families found joy in the simple things. The squeak of a screen door closing on a summer afternoon, the faint aroma of cut grass drifting through open windows, or the hum of a box fan slowly turning in the heat. These were not grand moments, but they were the heartbeat of ordinary life. Looking back now, it feels like those small details, the ones we barely noticed, are the very things that shaped our fondest memories. Then there were the record stores, magical places that felt like gateways to another world. The walls were lined with rows of 45s, their colorful sleeves calling out with promises of the next big hit. Teenagers flipped through stacks of vinyl, holding each one carefully as though it were a fragile treasure, debating which song might define their summer. And if you were lucky, the shop had a jukebox, chrome polished to a shine, glowing lights beckoning you in, and the satisfying clunk of the arm dropping onto a record. For a dime, the room would fill with the voices of Elvis, the Supremes, or the Beach Boys. Couples leaned close, friends laughed, strangers nodded along to the same beat. It wasn't just music. It was joy, discovery, and the kind of community that can't be streamed or downloaded today. Summer nights often ended at the drive-in theater, a place that blended movies, family, and pure Americana under the stars. You'd pull into a gravel lot, windows rolled down, the night air carrying the smell of buttered popcorn from the snack bar. Kids in pajamas bounced in the back seat while parents unwrapped hot dogs and sodas, trying to settle everyone in before the show began. Then the screen flickered to life, larger than anything you'd ever seen, glowing against the dark sky. The sound crackled through a metal speaker hooked to your window, tinny but magical, filling the car with laughter and gasps. Couples whispered in the front seat, children giggled in the back, and teenagers leaned on hoods, eyes fixed on the screen. The drive-in wasn't just a movie theater. It was a gathering place, a shared memory beneath the stars, the kind of magic that feels almost impossible today. Every town seemed to have its own five-and-dime store, a place where the wooden floors creaked under your shoes and aisles stretched out like little treasure hunts. Buttons, ribbons, toy soldiers, and coloring books filled the shelves, each item begging to be picked up. Mothers searched for sewing supplies, while children tugged at their skirts, eyes fixed on shelves stacked with marbles, paper dolls, and yo-yos. And in the back, the lunch counter glowed with chrome stools and the smell of grilled cheese on the griddle. For just a few coins, you could enjoy a plate of meatloaf with mashed potatoes, or a milkshake so thick it nearly bent your straw. Woolworth's wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable, a place where families gathered, kids dreamed, and small-town life came alive in the simplest of ways. Of course, no childhood in the 60s felt complete without the neighborhood barbershop. Saturday mornings were spent waiting your turn in a leather chair, the scent of shaving cream and talcum powder filling the air. The barber knew every boy by name and every father's story, spinning the chair with a smile and a gentle pat on the shoulder. While Dad swapped local news in the back, kids nervously fidgeted as clippers buzzed and hair fell to the floor in soft piles. A fresh haircut meant more than just neat hair. It meant pride, a handshake, and walking out into the sunshine feeling just a little older, a little taller. It was ritual, trust, and community wrapped up in one small shop. Sundays often carried their own rhythm. Families dressed in their best clothes, children squirming as mothers straightened collars and tied bows. Church bells echoed across small towns, calling neighbors together. Inside, stained glass windows glowed with soft light. Hymns filled the air, and hands shook warmly at every pew. Afterward, families spilled onto sidewalks, women sharing recipes, men talking baseball scores, and children racing off to play. The rest of the day was slow and sweet, a pot roast in the oven, radio humming in the background, and perhaps a drive through the countryside before sunset. Sundays weren't just about faith. They were about slowing down, reconnecting, and remembering what truly mattered. For many children, the schoolhouse was another world of memories. Chalk dust hung in the air as teachers wrote lessons across wide green boards, and the sharp smell of freshly sharpened pencils filled the room. Desks creaked when you leaned back, and the loud ring of the school bell marked each passing hour. At recess, playgrounds came alive with the sound of tetherballs being smacked, jump ropes slapping the pavement, and kids trading marbles or baseball cards. Lunchboxes, decorated with favorite TV characters or superheroes, held peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and a thermos filled with milk. The classroom wasn't just a place of learning. It was where friendships formed, where laughter echoed, and where the days seemed endless. Saturday mornings carried their own kind of magic. The week's worries disappeared as kids woke early, pajama-clad and wide-eyed, to gather in front of the television. Cereal poured into brightly colored bowls, spoons clinked, and milk sloshed while cartoons flickered across the screen. Shows like the Flintstones and Looney Tunes filled the air with laughter as parents lingered nearby with coffee in hand. The morning stretched lazily into the afternoon, filled with chores, bike rides, or trips downtown. Saturdays were about balance, the comfort of routine mixed with the freedom of play. Looking back now, they shine in memory like long, sunlit afternoons that never seemed to end. And who could forget the family road trips? Long before GPS or tablets, families packed station wagons with coolers, blankets, and restless kids. Windows rolled down, the warm air carried the smell of gasoline and roadside diners. Children played I Spy, counted license plates, or stretched across the back seat without seatbelts, watching clouds drift by. Diners along the highway offered burgers, fries, and slices of homemade pie, while gas stations handed out free road maps that dads studied like treasures. Each stop felt like an adventure, each mile a memory in the making. The journey was often just as exciting as the destination, filled with laughter, arguments, and songs sung off-key together. As the decade drifted by, these little moments stitched themselves into the fabric of everyday life. They weren't grand or earth-shaking. They were simple joys. The creak of a porch swing on a warm night, the glow of a street lamp as fireflies danced nearby, the comfort of neighbors waving as you passed. The 1960s wasn't just a decade of change. It was a time of connection, when the smallest things left the deepest marks. Looking back today, we realize those little treasures, the soda fountains, the drive-ins, the five and dimes, were never just places or objects. They were pieces of our lives, reminders of a world that felt slower, warmer, and more human. And though that world may never return, it will always live in our hearts.